The golden facade. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the Sterling mansion as Victoria Sterling guided her wheelchair through the grand foyer. Once, she had designed every detail of this space: the sweeping staircase with its custom wrought iron railings, the soaring ceiling with hidden LED strips that created the illusion of natural skylights. Now the very stairs she had crafted seemed to mock her, a beautiful barrier she could no longer climb. At 35, Victoria had been at the pinnacle of her career as an architect. Her sustainable designs had transformed city skylines across Europe, and her innovative approach to eco-friendly construction had earned her international recognition. The Sterling and Associates firm, which she had built with her husband Marcus, was synonymous with cutting-edge architecture that married beauty with environmental responsibility. Marcus Sterling entered the foyer, adjusting his Armani tie with the practiced ease of a man comfortable with luxury. At 42, he remained devastatingly handsome. His dark hair now touched with silver at the temples, his athletic build maintained through expensive personal trainers and exclusive gym memberships. He had always been the charismatic face of their business, the one who charmed clients, while Victoria created the magic behind their success. "The car will be here in 10 minutes, Marcus announced, barely glancing at his wife. The Morrison Foundation. Dinner is crucial for landing the waterfront project. Commissioner Bradley will be there, and I need his support for the zoning changes." Victoria nodded, smoothing the fabric of her evening gown. The deep emerald dress had been tailored to accommodate her seated position, but she still felt self-conscious. 6 months had passed since the accident, a horrific collision on the M25 during a site visit that had crushed 2 vertebrae and left her legs partially paralyzed. The doctors said she was fortunate. With extensive physical therapy she might regain some mobility, but fortune felt like a cruel joke when your life's work involved climbing construction sites and walking through building spaces. "I've prepared some talking points about the accessibility features for the waterfront towers," Victoria offered, wheeling herself toward the study where she had left her portfolio. "The universal design elements could be a major selling point." Marcus's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flash of irritation quickly masked by concern. "Darling, you don't need to worry about the technical details tonight. This is primarily a social event. You just need to look beautiful and let me handle the business discussions." The dismissal stung, though Victoria had grown accustomed to such subtle put-downs. Before the accident, Marcus had relied heavily on her expertise. Now he seemed to view her contributions as burdensome, her presence more liability than asset. She told herself it was temporary, that he was simply protecting her during her recovery. But doubt crept in during the long hours she spent alone. In the mansion, while Marcus attended meetings, she was no longer invited to join. Their driver, Robert, appeared at the door with Victoria's specialized wheelchair lift. As Marcus helped her into the Bentley, his touch was efficient but cold, the assistance of a caregiver rather than a husband. During the 20-minute drive to the Savoy, Marcus reviewed notes on his phone, occasionally taking calls from business associates. Victoria stared out the window at the London streets, feeling like a passenger in her own life. The Morrison Foundation dinner was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, filled with the city's elite philanthropists and business leaders. Victoria had once moved confidently through such events, her architectural achievements opening doors and commanding respect. Tonight, she felt invisible, relegated to a corner table, while Marcus worked the room with his characteristic charm. "Victoria, darling," Lady Morrison approached with the exaggerated sympathy that had become familiar. "You look absolutely radiant. How brave of you to come out tonight. Marcus told me about your situation. Such a tragedy for someone so talented." The past tense grated against Victoria's nerves. "I'm still practicing architecture," she replied. Firmly. In fact, I'm working on some innovative accessibility designs that could revolutionize how we think about public spaces. How wonderful that you're keeping busy, Lady Morrison replied, with the patronizing tone one might use with a child's hobby. It must be so therapeutic. As the evening wore on, Victoria watched Marcus charm potential clients and city officials. He moved through conversations with practiced ease, occasionally mentioning "my wife's accident" as a conversation starter that elicited sympathetic murmurs and admiring comments about his devotion. She realized with growing discomfort that her tragedy had become part of his business strategy, the devoted husband caring for his disabled wife, a narrative that enhanced his image as a compassionate leader. Near midnight, as they finally left the hotel, Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The text was simple but chilling. "You deserve to know the truth about your husband." Attached was a photograph that made her blood run cold. The image showed Marcus embracing a stunning blonde woman outside an upscale restaurant. The woman appeared to be in her late 20s, elegantly dressed and visibly pregnant. Marcus's expression in the photo was one Victoria hadn't seen in months. Tender, protective, genuinely happy. The timestamp showed it had been taken 3 hours earlier, while Victoria had been waiting alone at their corner table, believing Marcus was in business discussions. As their car pulled into the mansion's driveway, Victoria stared at the photo, her mind reeling. The golden facade of their marriage, like the beautiful buildings she designed, was apparently hiding a rotting foundation, and she was determined to discover just how deep the decay had spread. Cracks in the foundation. Victoria stared at the photograph until her eyes burned, but the image remained unchanged. Marcus with his arms around a pregnant woman, both of them glowing with unmistakable intimacy. She had barely slept, her mind racing through explanations that grew increasingly hollow with each passing hour. The next morning, Marcus left early for what he claimed was a breakfast meeting with potential investors. Victoria waited until she heard his car disappear down the drive before making her first call to Detective James Harper, a private investigator recommended by her solicitor during the insurance proceedings after her accident. "Mrs. Sterling," Harper's gravelly voice carried the weight of experience. "I remember your case. Terrible business. How can I help you?" Victoria's voice was steady despite her trembling hands. "I need to know if my husband is having an affair." Harper arrived at the mansion within 2 hours. A weathered man in his 50s, with kind eyes and an unassuming manner that probably served him well in his profession. He examined the photograph with professional detachment. "The woman is Celeste Monroe," he said, after running the image through facial recognition software. 28 years old, works as a marketing consultant. She's been associated with several high-end property developments in the past year. Victoria's stomach clenched. "Associated how?" "She's been hired by Sterling and Associates for 3 major projects. Always personally recruited by your husband." Harper's expression was gentle but firm. "Mrs. Sterling, I need to ask, are you prepared for what we might find?" Over the next 2 weeks, Harper's investigation revealed a web of deception that left Victoria reeling. Marcus had been involved with Celeste for over a year, maintaining an expensive flat for her in Knightsbridge and financing her lavish lifestyle through a series of shell companies. The pregnancy was indeed his. Medical records Harper obtained through discreet channels confirmed a due date that aligned perfectly with the timeline of their affair. More disturbing was the financial analysis. Dr. Rachel Webb, a neurologist, Victoria consulted independently, examined her medical records with growing concern. "Mrs. Sterling, several of your medications have been prescribed in combinations that would cause severe cognitive impairment," Dr. Webb explained during a private consultation. "The dosages of these particular drugs would cause confusion, memory, In problems and depression, who has been managing your medication regimen? Marcus handles all of that, Victoria replied, a chill running down her spine. He says the schedule is too complex for me to manage in my condition. Dr. Webb's expression darkened. In my professional opinion, this combination of medications is not only unnecessary but potentially harmful to your recovery. With your permission, I'd like to begin gradually reducing these dosages and substituting more appropriate treatments. As Victoria's medication was adjusted over the following weeks, the fog that had clouded her mind began to lift. Her energy returned, her thinking became sharper, and most significantly, her physical therapy sessions showed remarkable improvement. The progress that had stalled for months suddenly accelerated. "It's like you're a different person," commented her physiotherapist during one session. "Your coordination and strength have improved dramatically." The implications were terrifying. Marcus had been deliberately keeping her sedated and confused, presumably to maintain control over their finances and business decisions. Harper's investigation confirmed this theory when he uncovered a series of legal documents Marcus had prepared but never filed. Papers that would have granted him power of attorney over Victoria's affairs due to her diminished mental capacity following traumatic brain injury. The most shocking revelation came when Harper presented Victoria with construction records from the site where her accident had occurred. The safety inspection reports showed multiple violations that had been overlooked or deliberately ignored. The guardrail that failed had been reported as structurally unsound 3 weeks before your visit, Harper explained, spreading photographs across Victoria's desk. The work order to repair it was signed off as completed, but the actual repairs were never done. The signature authorizing the site as safe for your inspection belongs to Marcus. Victoria's hand shook as she examined the documents. "Are you suggesting that Marcus knew the site was dangerous when he sent me there?" Harper's expression was grim. "I'm saying the evidence suggests your husband may have been planning this for longer than we initially thought. The affair with Celeste began 14 months ago. The construction site issues were documented but ignored 6 weeks before your accident, and the legal papers establishing his control over your assets were drafted just 1 month after you were released from the hospital. The picture that emerged was of a man who had methodically planned to eliminate his inconvenient wife while positioning himself to inherit her share of their business empire." Victoria realized with crystalline clarity that she hadn't just been betrayed, she had been targeted for destruction by the man who had promised to love and protect her. That evening, as Marcus returned home with his usual air of concerned devotion, Victoria watched him with new eyes. He brought her the familiar evening pills, his expression solicitous and caring. "How are you feeling, darling? You look tired. These should help you sleep." For the first time in months, Victoria palmed the pills instead of swallowing them. "Much better, actually. Dr. Webb thinks I'm making excellent progress." Something flickered across Marcus's face, annoyance perhaps, or concern. "Dr. Webb, I thought Dr. Peterson was managing your care." "I wanted a second opinion," Victoria replied casually. "She's quite optimistic about my recovery prospects." As Marcus kissed her forehead with practiced tenderness, Victoria felt nothing but cold determination. The foundation of their marriage had indeed cracked, but she was no longer the helpless victim Marcus believed her to be. The architect in her understood that before you could build something new, you had to completely demolish what was rotten, and Marcus Sterling was about to discover that his carefully constructed facade was about to come crashing down. Part 3. Blueprint for Justice. Victoria's transformation over the following month was remarkable, though she was careful to hide the extent of her recovery from Marcus. With Dr. Webb's guidance, she had completely weaned herself off the unnecessary medications, and her strength returned with startling speed. More importantly, her mind was sharper than it had been in months, allowing her to think strategically about her situation. Attorney Linda Cross came highly recommended by Detective Harper, a formidable woman in her 50s who specialized in complex divorce cases involving high-net-worth individuals. She listened to Victoria's story with the cool professionalism of someone who had seen every variation of human betrayal. "The medication tampering alone gives us grounds for criminal charges," Cross explained during their first meeting at her Mayfair office. "Combined with the financial fraud and the questionable circumstances of your accident, we're looking at potential attempted murder charges." Victoria had expected to feel satisfaction at those words, but instead she felt only a cold clarity. "I want to be strategic about this. Marcus is brilliant and charismatic. If we move too quickly, he'll find a way to spin the narrative in his favor." Cross nodded approvingly. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to document everything first. Let him think he's winning while we gather irrefutable evidence. He's planning something. Harper's surveillance suggests he's been meeting with lawyers of his own. Indeed, Harper's reports painted a picture of a man preparing for war. Marcus had been consulting with divorce attorneys, financial advisors, and even a psychiatrist who specialized in competency evaluations. The strategy was becoming clear. He intended to have Victoria declared mentally unfit, assume control of her assets, and then divorce her while keeping both her money and their business. What Marcus didn't know was that Victoria had an unexpected ally within his own organization. David Chen, Marcus's business partner and the firm's chief financial officer, had grown increasingly uncomfortable with the irregularities he'd noticed in the company accounts. "I've been with the firm for 8 years, David confided during a discreet meeting at Victoria's request. "I've always respected both of you, but lately Marcus has been making financial decisions without consultation. Large sums moving through accounts I don't recognize. Contracts signed without board approval." Victoria showed him some of Harper's financial findings, evidence of money being funneled to support Celeste's lifestyle through fabricated consulting contracts. David's face paled. "This explains the discrepancies I've been finding. Victoria, he's been embezzling from the employee pension fund. If this becomes public, it won't just destroy Marcus. It could bring down the entire firm and ruin hundreds of people who depend on us." This revelation added a new dimension to Victoria's plans. It wasn't just about personal justice anymore. Marcus's actions threatened the livelihoods of everyone who worked for Sterling and Associates. The firm she had built from nothing was being hollowed out to finance her husband's betrayal. The foundation crumbles. The Dorchester's ballroom sparkled with crystal and gold, filled with London's most influential figures. Victoria arrived in a stunning midnight blue gown that had been specially tailored to complement her wheelchair, projecting an image of elegant resilience. Marcus, resplendent in his bespoke tuxedo, played the devoted husband to perfection, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder as photographers captured their entrance. "You look beautiful tonight," he murmured in her ear, and Victoria detected the genuine affection in his voice. Even now she realized some part of him still cared for her, which made his betrayal all the more devastating. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady. "I wanted to look my best for your special announcement." The early part of the evening proceeded as Marcus had planned. He delivered a moving speech about the Sterling Foundation's commitment to accessible design, with Victoria positioned prominently beside him as a living testament to the importance of their mission. The audience was captivated by his passion and eloquence, and several major donors made substantial pledges. But Victoria had orchestrated her own performance for the evening's climax. As Marcus prepared to introduce what he had described to the press as a personal announcement of great significance, she activated the wireless microphone system she had secretly installed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice carrying across the hushed ballroom, "tonight I want to share something deeply personal with all of you." He gestured toward a side entrance where, on cue, Celeste Munro appeared. She was radiant in a flowing silver gown that elegantly showcased her pregnancy, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves. The audience stirred with curiosity as Marcus extended his hand to her. "I'd like you to meet Celeste Munro," Marcus announced, his voice rich with pride. "Not only as the new creative director of Sterling and Associates, but as the mother of my child and the woman who has shown me that sometimes life offers us a second chance at happiness." The ballroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Camera flashes exploded as reporters realized they were witnessing a public confession of adultery by one of London's most prominent businessmen. Victoria sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable, as Marcus continued. "I know this comes as a surprise," he said, raising his champagne glass. "Marriage, like architecture, sometimes requires renovation. Victoria and I have grown apart since her accident, and while I will always care for her and ensure she receives the best possible care, I cannot deny my heart's true calling." It was then that Victoria began to smile, the same chilling smile that had unnerved Marcus months ago when she first suspected his betrayal. She activated her own microphone, and her clear voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd. "How beautifully put, Marcus," she said, her tone conversational but carrying clearly through the sound system. "Though I think our guests deserve to hear the complete story of your heart's true calling." Marcus turned toward her, his face draining of color as he realized she was speaking publicly. "Victoria, darling, perhaps this isn't the time." "Oh, but it is exactly the time," Victoria interrupted, wheeling herself forward. "You see, everyone, my husband has been quite modest about the extent of his renovation efforts. With practiced timing, large screens around the ballroom came to life, displaying financial documents that Harper and the forensic accountants had prepared. The evidence was presented with the clarity and precision that had made Victoria famous as an architect, every detail labeled and explained. These documents show how Marcus has been embezzling from Sterling and Associates for over 2 years, Victoria explained calmly. Nearly £3 million diverted to shell companies, all to finance his new life with Ms. Munro, while keeping me medically sedated and financially dependent. The crowd was riveted, their shock giving way to horrified fascination. Judge Patricia Morrison, who had been scheduled to present Marcus with a humanitarian award later in the evening, stood abruptly from her table, her face a mask of disgust. Victoria continued her methodical destruction of Marcus's reputation. "The medication tampering is documented here, along with expert testimony from Dr. Rachel Webb, explaining how the unnecessary drugs impaired my recovery and cognitive function. And this," a new set of images appeared on the screens. Construction, documents from the site where Victoria's accident had occurred. These show that Marcus signed off on the safety of a construction site he knew to be dangerous, sending me there on the day of my accident. Marcus finally found his voice. "This is insane. Victoria, you're having another episode. Everyone can see you're not well." His words were cut off as audio recordings began playing through the sound system. His own voice filled the ballroom, clear and unmistakable, discussing plans to have Victoria declared mentally incompetent and committed to a psychiatric facility. "The key is establishing a pattern of erratic behavior," his recorded voice explained to Dr. Blackwood. "With her medical history and the medication she's been taking, it shouldn't be difficult to demonstrate diminished capacity." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stood frozen on the stage, his face cycling through expressions of denial, anger, and finally, desperate calculation. Celeste had gone pale, her hand protectively covering her pregnant belly as she realized the extent of the man she had fallen in love with. Detective Harper appeared at the side of the stage, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. "Marcus Sterling," Harper announced, You're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit false imprisonment." As the handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists, he looked directly at Victoria. For a moment, his mask of charm completely slipped, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "You think you've won," he said quietly, his voice carrying only to her. "But you'll spend the rest of your life in that chair, alone and broken, while I rebuild. Everything from prison, that's all you'll ever be now. A crippled has-been whose husband left her for a better woman." Victoria's smile never wavered. "Oh, Marcus," she said, loud enough for the microphones to catch. "You still don't understand. I was never the broken one in this marriage. I was just temporarily under construction." As Marcus was led away, the ballroom erupted in chaos. Reporters rushed toward Victoria, cameras flashed, and several prominent guests approached to offer their support. Judge Morrison, who would later oversee Marcus's criminal trial, paused beside Victoria's wheelchair. "That was the most thorough demolition I've ever witnessed," she said quietly, "both professional and personal." Victoria looked around the ballroom, at the shocked faces, the recording cameras, the evidence of her husband's destruction displayed on every screen. It was, she realized, exactly like watching a controlled building implosion. Years of careful planning, precise placement of charges, perfect timing, and then complete structural collapse. "Sometimes," Victoria replied, "you have to tear something down completely before you can build it back better." Part 5. Rising from the Ruins. 6 months after the spectacular revelation at the Dorchester, Victoria actually stood, at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new office, looking out over the London skyline. The view showed several buildings bearing her architectural signature, structures that had survived Marcus's attempts to erase her legacy from their firm. Her sister Emma found her there, reviewing blueprints spread across a drafting table that had been adjusted to accommodate both her wheelchair and her increasing ability to stand for short periods. "The physical therapy is really working," Emma observed, noting Victoria's improved posture and the walking frame positioned nearby. "Dr. Webb was right about those medications holding back your recovery," Victoria nodded, flexing her legs experimentally. The damage from her accident would always limit her mobility, but without the cocktail of unnecessary drugs Marcus had been feeding her, her body was healing in ways the doctors had thought impossible. "I'll probably always need the wheelchair for long distances," she said, settling back into it to review her designs. "But I'm designing buildings now that I could never have created before the accident. Understanding accessibility from the inside has revolutionized my approach to space." The criminal trial had been a sensation. Marcus received 12 years for embezzlement, fraud, and attempted murder, with additional charges pending for the safety violations that had caused Victoria's accident. The evidence Victoria had gathered was so comprehensive that his legal team had no choice but to negotiate a plea deal. Celeste Munro had cooperated fully with prosecutors, testifying about Marcus's manipulation and control. Her baby, a daughter she named Hope, had been born healthy 3 months ago. In a surprising turn of events, Celeste had approached Victoria through lawyers, offering to return the money Marcus had spent on